Hi there, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Olympus E-M1X and the 12-40 Pro lens, sold separately. Let's get started. The Olympus E-M1X is a 20 megapixel micro four thirds mirrorless camera with a built-in vertical grip that will also give you double the power of the EM1 Mark III. This camera has in-body stabilization that works alongside the stabilization in its Olympus lenses, has 121 focus points, a fully articulating touch LCD screen, and has a continuous drive of 60 frames per second. It also has 4K video up to 30 frames, has 2 SD card slots, has a microphone port and headphone port, has a wireless built-in, and is also weather sealed. This camera is built for those who need double the power in a lightweight package that offers speed and ability to comfortably hold in either landscape or portrait orientation. Today we will be discussing the doors, buttons, and menus to help you navigate this camera a little bit easier. So today we're going to be going over the E-M1X camera. As you can see, this guy is pretty big. For an Olympus. Typically, the Olympus cameras you see are going to be rather small, travel friendly. This guy, they really built for portrait photography, event photography, the go-to tough, interchangeable lens mirrorless camera. It's pretty fantastic, and even though it's big for its size, it's actually very lightweight for how big it looks, so something to keep in mind. It has a very comfortable grip. I have small hands, but I can see somebody with larger hands still finding this very comfortable. And what's nice is it does have that nice vertical grip here as well, with the shutter button and the same exposure ISO button here as well. We are going to go over those more in detail today as well, so just keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead and start with the front of the camera here. Now, this is the Olympus 12-40 Pro lens. They're 2.8. This lens does not come with this camera. It is something that I do want to put out there, but it is an excellent addition to this camera because it's going to be the equivalent of a 24-70 almost. Really, it's a 24-80, but still, if you have shot with a crop sensor or a full frame camera, you know that that is like the lens to get in your collection. It's part of that, trinity, and I wanted to show off its portrait. I wanted to show off its portrait examples of how well this lens does, so you guys definitely saw that in the example footage. Like a lot of the Pro lenses, this does have a focusing ring that slides back to kick it into manual focus. You'll slide it forward for autofocus. That's just how these are designed, rather than having an actual autofocus manual focus switch on the camera itself. However, it does have a button here, an FN button, which is a function button, which you can program in the camera if you would like that to do something specific, like changing the ISO or some other sort of command that you would like a shortcut to. So that is available on a lot of the Pro lenses. On the camera itself, we do have a button here, which is going to allow us to remove the lens. So if you click and hold that button here, turn, it's going to allow us to remove. To put a lens on it, you're going to line up the red dot with the red dot here. Right, and you'll turn it until it clicks so you know it's seated. So make sure to listen for that. We do have a spot here that allows you to hook up a flash sync cable to it. And then we have a few buttons here. Now, these two buttons are going to match these two buttons for the times that you are going to be using it this way versus this way. Now, my fingers are a little short for this. Personally, I can barely touch this. So if you have small hands, that might be something that you struggle with. But if your hands are bigger than mine, I know it's hard to tell, but I have pretty small hands, so it shouldn't be an issue. But each of these buttons are programmable, same as here. See, what this one does currently is I believe it is a preview button for your aperture, versus the top one here is actually going to allow you to do a one-touch white balance. So it'll have you point it to like a white piece of paper and adjust the white balance accordingly just through there. So that's a really neat feature for this camera, so you can make sure that you're getting a proper color balance in your images. Perfect for portraits and events accordingly. We have an adjust wheel here, same as on the back. These of course are going to be for adjusting shutter speed and aperture depending on the mode that you're on. We have our shutter button here as well. This is going to be for pushing halfway down to focus and then all the way down to take a picture. Let's see, and of course on the grip side you'll see that we still have that adjustment wheel here and on the back, and our shutter button here as well, which is going to give you the same options. Going to this side of the camera, you can see that we have for the vertical grip, which will be the same as the top of this camera, we have our exposure button, which will allow us to make our scene a little bit brighter, a little bit darker, if we just need that little bit of boost. That way we don't have to compromise on the shutter speed or aperture depending on the mode that you're in. We have your ISO button, which will allow you to change your sensitivity to light. Again, that's going to be the same as the top of the camera here. Here is where our card compartment's going to be. In order to open this, you're just going to flip up this little switch here and turn. It's going to pop it right open. So both of these card slots are going to be SD card slots, so it shouldn't be too hard to find a card for this camera, which is good. It does show you on the door here the proper way to put the card into the camera, seeing how one of the corners is cut off, and that is the direction that you'll put it in when you're looking at the door itself. And then of course we have a little door here. This is going to be for a shutter release cable. So if I get that open, you can see that we have a little port there for a wired shutter release. For those times where maybe you want to try doing long exposures, or if you're taking a picture of a group and you're trying to get the kids' attention, that way instead of being so focused on the camera, you can try and get their attention there and then just take the picture aside with a wireless shutter, or with a wired shutter release. On the other side of the camera here, you can see we have a few more doors. If we take a look here, we have our battery compartment for the grip. So this is going to have 2 of the big batteries, which is pretty fantastic. So you shouldn't have very many issues being able to go through a whole day shooting. Although this camera does offer USB charging, which is pretty fantastic. So if you're in a bind and you're just like, I gotta charge my batteries for a few minutes, I have a moment, this is USB-C charged. You can also connect this to your computer this way through the USB-C cable to transfer images, upgrade firmware, that sort of thing. We also have an HDMI port here, which will allow you to connect the camera right up to your computer screen, an external monitor, a television screen, or even a projector to show some images that you've taken of the event, you know, kind of maybe do a preview. Then of course we have our headphone port, and we also have our mic port as well. At the bottom of the camera you can see because it has the grip here, it's going to be pretty simple. All you'll have is that universal tripod screw that you'll be able to put this on a tripod and whatnot, so not too shabby there. Focusing on the top of the camera now, getting more into the buttons here. We've kind of gone over this area. Now you'll notice that on the top of the camera here we do have a red button versus on the grip we do not, and that's because typically you wouldn't record video vertically, so just keep that in mind. This of course is going to be recording video. You'll push it once to start recording, push it again to stop recording. Pretty simple. We have our mode dial here. So it does have a lock feature, this little button here where you'll be able to spin it freely, and then when you want to lock it in and not accidentally change it, you'll just hit the button down. You'll notice this camera does not have an automatic mode, so do keep that in mind. This is going to be geared more toward the professional that understands shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. But if you're pushing yourself to learn these things and how a camera works, perfect. That's probably why you're here looking at this video. The P mode is going to be the closest to auto mode that you're going to get. It's going to be kind of your assisted shooting mode, where you can pick your shutter speed and aperture to a specific limit where the camera knows those settings are specifically going to work, and it's going to pick everything else for you so the picture still comes out wonderfully. This is a great mode to start learning this camera on, getting used to all the features and the menus and whatnot, getting comfortable with this camera. The P mode is definitely going to be the mode that is going to be your best friend. The A mode is going to be your aperture mode. This is where you're primarily going to control your aperture, that opening in the lens that gives you your depth of field options, that nice blurry background, sharp foreground, and also helps you in low light situations. While the camera is going to figure out the shutter speed for you. So this is perfect to use in those portrait areas, especially outdoors. Your S mode, of course, is going to be your shutter speed mode, where you're controlling the speed. This camera does have some pretty excellent speed features, considering that it takes pictures at 60 frames per second, which is just absolutely insane. But you're essentially going to control here how fast the shutter will click on your single picture mode, either showing motion or freezing motion, while the camera figures out the aperture accordingly. You have your manual mode, which of course allows you to figure out everything and anything in your exposure triangle, and your focusing and all of those things. You have full control, and the camera's only doing what you tell it to. The B mode is going to be your bulb mode. This is going to allow you to do long exposures for as long as you would like, just to holding the shutter open for any certain time that you would like to test it out for. We have our C1, C2, C3, and C4 options. These are all going to be custom options. These are for situations where, say, you are say, shooting in a studio setting, where you have found the perfect lighting situation, you found the perfect settings in your manual mode, but then you want to go outdoors and take pictures. What you can do is actually save your settings to one of these custom modes. That way, when you return, all you have to do is go back to one of these custom modes instead of starting from scratch trying to find that perfect setting. So it's a really good option if you work in a regular lighting situation, or if there's a specific setting that you like to work in. Your custom modes will just allow you to save it to a very convenient place. Then, of course, we have our video mode. Now, you can do video on any of your manual modes here, the P, A, S, or M. The video mode here also allows you to take video, but the menu itself and certain aspects are going to be more specific toward video than if you were to just press record on one of these guys. So do keep that in mind. Of course, for the rest of the video, I'm just going to stay on the P mode. This will allow you to use an external flash. That way you can add light to your subject. If you're doing portraiture work, even outdoors in the middle of the day, I strongly recommend an external flash with a diffuser. Take a look at my, why you should get a flash and diffuser video if you would like to learn more. Then, of course, we have our on and off switch here, along with a few buttons. So this button here is going to control our drive mode. So if we take a look at the back screen here, you'll see that if we adjust the front wheel, it's going to adjust the top row here. This is going to be our flash settings, while the bottom is going to be our drive mode. So you have single shot, single silent shot, you have your sequential high, which is the 60 frames per second, silent high speed, continuous, pro capture high, you have your sequential low. So there's a lot of options here, including timer options that you can play with regarding your drive mode. We have our autofocus and metering here. So again, to adjust the top, which would be the metering, you're going to adjust the front dial here, which will give you kind of your estimated all over value. You have your center weighted, you have your spot, and your spot highlights and spot shadows, which are really unique to these guys here, which are pretty awesome, I think. I'm usually a center weighted person. I like to use my auto exposure lock, auto focus lock button here to lock in my exposure when I need it. And then, of course, adjusting the rear dial here, you adjust your autofocus modes. So you have your single autofocus for a single subject that's not moving, continuous autofocus, so it continually autofocuses on something that is moving, your manual focus, And then we have autofocus tracking and preset manual focus. So as you can already see, this camera is going to be highly customizable to however you want to shoot, which is pretty excellent if you have a specific idea for exactly what you're looking for in your camera and how, what features you want available. Then of course we have our bracketing button, which just allows you to turn your bracketing on and off. Back here we can change the look of the screen here when it comes to if you would like to see a preview on the screen versus just wanting to see your information here. You can change this information by pushing the OK button, which will allow you to scroll around on the screen and change your autofocus, your white balance, the picture mode. When it comes to your color, you can change sharpness and contrast and graduation and saturation. Your autofocus mode, you can change your color space, which I just recommend keeping in US RGB. You have your aspect ratio, your video settings, highlight and shadow control, your button function if you want to change your different buttons on the outside. If you want your cards to shoot in RAW or JPEG or mix it up. Here's your drive mode and metering mode again if you would like it on face priority. If you're taking pictures of, you have your autofocus area where you want the camera to autofocus, your different flash modes for when you have a flash available. You have your image stabilizer, so if you are on a tripod you want to make sure you turn this off, so that's something to keep in mind. And then of course you have your save settings here as well. And if you would like to get back to viewing on the screen, you can just hit this button again. It's going to give you right back to live view. Of course, we have our viewfinder here. We do on the side of the camera here have a diopter, is what they call it, which will adjust the focusing in the viewfinder for you if you are someone that wears glasses. So something to keep in mind there. This screen also does flip around, so in case you did not want to use the screen or you just want to protect it, you can just flip it here and just use the viewfinder if you would like. You can also flip it forward for doing any sort of vlogging or self-shooting, which is really great. We have a switch here, which is going to be your autofocus switch. Number 1 is going to allow you to change any of those autofocus modes, but switching it to number 2, you'll see it pop up with a MF on the screen, which is going to be manual focus. So that means that you would use that front ring on your lens. And of course we have our function button, which does bring up the options for having like all of your points available, all 121, just a small section, a smaller section, and a smaller section, and then you have like single points available as well. Personally, I like to keep mine more toward the middle because I'm a center shooter, or like I was talking about your autofocus auto exposure lock. I'll start in the center, hit this button down to lock it in, and then recompose my shot. But that's just the way I like to shoot personally. We have our joystick here, which if you just toggle the joystick, it'll allow you to move those points around, which is pretty amazing. We have your info button, which just changes how the screen looks. So we have just a plain screen. We have a screen with our histogram available, which gives you kind of the measure of shadows and highlights. We have our mic levels available here. We have our balancing options here, which give you kind of up, down, side, side balance. If they're both green, then they are actually going to be both in balance, so something to keep in mind. And then we're back to kind of a regular screen with just basic information. So it's showing you which battery it's using. I'm still on number 1, still at 100%. It's showing you like your metering, what ISO is on. It's showing like what mode you're on, your exposure compensation. It's showing how much time for video you have left versus how many pictures you have left on your card. You know, just kind of basic settings there. I like to have it on this one because I like to see these settings, anything from the battery mode to how many pictures I have left. It's nice to have it available on there. Of course, we have our directional pad and our OK confirmation button. We have the playback button, which will show us the pictures that we've taken. We have another joystick here. It's going to do the same thing here when we're in our portrait mode. We have our different lock switches, which will allow us to lock in certain buttons from being pushed. That can also be set in the menu as well. We have your white balance button available in case you did want to go with a preset white balance, but overall I would just keep it in auto, and at most I would just try and use the front button to use that white piece of paper trick. You can switch your card, which card you would like to be the primary, just by hitting the card button. And because I only have one card in it, naturally it's just going to stay on card 1. We have the trash can button, which is going to allow us to delete pictures on the playback mode. And of course we have our menu button, which we are going to go over here last. And it is telling you here if you are charging by USB-C, which battery is charging, and if it's fully charged through USB as well. Alright, so going into our menu here, this is probably going to be the most in-depth part of the video. So as you can see on the menu, we do have several tabs there on the left-hand side. So what is nice about the menu is you can see that it's coming up with a pop-up box. So tab 1 is going to be preliminary and basic shooting options. Tab 2 is going to be advanced shooting options. Tab 3 is going to be your menu for basic and detailed video settings. Tab 4 is going to be your playback and retouch options. Tab 5 is going to be detailed camera options, which gives you a lot of custom options on here. So kind of cover these, but I'm not going to cover all of it just because there's so many options here. You're probably not going to touch more than half of them. We have your setup menu, which is to set up basic camera functions. And then you have your My Menu, which allows you to save your frequently used menu items to this tab so you don't have to go digging through the menu itself. So going in here, we have your reset custom modes. In case you do get stuck in this camera where you've changed something and you don't know how to change it back, you can always reset it back to the way that you purchased it. That way it should be in fine working order and, you know, no big deal, no harm, no foul. We have your picture mode, which you can also change in your quick menu, which is that OK option. When you're in your shooting menu, a lot of these you can do that. So again, I'm going to kind of speed through here. Photo quality, which again, through the quick menu, your image aspect ratio, through the quick menu. You can turn on your digital teleconverter, which allows you to naturally kind of get more distance out of your lenses. But that is totally preference. I wouldn't personally use that, but that's just me. We have your drive menu, just the same as the button on top of the camera. We'll go to tab 2. Your bracketing, same as the top of the camera. We have your HDR, which is going to be your high dynamic range, which will kind of show you more details in your highlights and shadows, just with using the way the camera can help define those. You have your multiple exposure option here, which will allow you to kind of double up pictures, which is kind of neat. Your keystone compensation. Oops. You'll see some indicators appear on the screen to help you kind of straighten out that distortion effect when you're taking pictures of like a skyscraper straight up from the ground. You have like anti-shock or silent mode. You have your high-res shot mode here. We have your video menu, so going to be very specific to your shooting menu or shooting options, just more specified for video. So setting your mode, like aperture, shutter speed mode, depending on what's more important to you. Your specification setting, your image stabilization settings, all the button dials and lever options where you can assign those certain things in your, when it comes to your shooting mode. You can turn the sound off when it comes to doing video if you don't want it to take any sound, versus if you would like to use it to use the built-in mics. Your HDMI output. In our playback menu, you can have it on to where it automatically rotates the picture for you. You can edit certain images to a degree in camera. You can protect certain images. You can reset the menu. You can connect to the Olympus image app on your phone, so you can transfer images from the camera to your phone. And we have our custom menu here. This one is going to be the most in-depth because, as you can see, now a second bar of tabs has started to display. So we have a lot of the alphabet going on. So starting with A1, these are going to be your autofocus manual focus options. So again, highly customizable. More autofocus areas here when it comes to your autofocus pointer area and targeting pad. If you would like to set it to a home area to where it just defaults to the middle or a certain part of the screen. We have autofocus limiter, autofocus illuminator, which is going to be the LED light in front of the camera to help it autofocus. It does have that option as well. Face priority, a tracking subject. A4 is going to be like manual focus assist, using your focusing ring, which direction you want to turn it to focus. Bulb time focusing. If you want to reset the lens, you know, if you've set certain things, or that function button accordingly, if you like to reset it. B is going to be your button dials and levers for your shooting mode. So you can set all of these to whatever you want, which is pretty fantastic. The C menu is going to be like your release, your drive mode, your image stabilizer, kind of more so on that. You have your flicker reduction, turning your image stabilizer on or off if you want the frames per second to be in priority when it comes to those continuous drives. Your D mode is going to be your display, the sound, connecting to the PC, so you can control all of those settings as well. You have your live view boost, you have your frame rate, live view close-up settings. I mean, these are all things that you may or may not even touch depending on the type of photography you want to do. You have your grid settings if you would like to set a grid on there to help you compose and balance your images. Your peaking or histogram settings. You also have a selfie assist because naturally you can flip out the screen. We have our sound if you would like that sound to be on when you're focusing. The HDMI, the USB mode. Your E tabs are going to be your exposure, your ISO, your bulb, your metering, you know, doing all of those so you can adjust your ISO setting. Like if you want your ISO in auto and you want to set it to a certain limit here. So what I would want to do is I would want to set it down to maybe 3200 as the upper limit, but set it as the default to at least 200. And then we have like ISO auto if you want it to be on all the modes versus on one mode. Your noise filter, your bulb and time timer, so you can actually set a timer on it versus having to time it yourself, which is pretty neat. Your metering, you know, if you want to change that, or your exposure shift. Your F menu is going to be your custom flash. Naturally, you'd have to have a flash to be able to really change these. G is going to be like your white balance and your color and kind of setting your pixel count and all of these things. Your H is going to be recording and erasing, so like your card slot settings if you want to set those, copyright settings, LEN info settings. You have your quick erase if you want to set it there, but honestly I would just keep it off. That way you can choose whether or not you really want to erase something because maybe you accidentally push it and then that picture's gone. You can set it on raw JPEG erase, so if you're say taking a picture in RAW and JPEG and you erase the RAW, it's going to erase the JPEG as well, which is nice. I is going to be your electronic viewfinder. That's what EVF stands for, so you can change the settings in there if you would like a grid inside, if you want it to auto switch when you bring your face up to it, which I like always having that on, adjusting the brightness accordingly. J is going to be, looks like different utility options, so you can adjust your touch screen, do pixel mapping, level adjust, you can change your battery settings, your LCD, you can change the sleep mode on this, so if you're not shooting pictures for so much time, it'll go into a sleep mode to save your battery. We have different GPS options here. Taking the elevation and temperature, like this camera has so many options for you. It's absolutely insane. So try not to be overwhelmed with this and just know that you're probably not going to use all of these settings, and it's not important for you to understand every single option. But if you do have questions on these, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to discuss it further with you. Then we have our setup menu. Card setup will be for formatting your card and getting it set up in the camera. Now, I do want to take the time to talk about this like I do with every camera. And the reason I want to is because a lot of people don't realize what formatting your card means. Formatting your card is going to be extremely important for the health of your card and for your future pictures. So basically, what you want to do is after an event or after a vacation or whatever you just took a bunch of pictures of, instead of, you know, making sure you back up your pictures to your computer, it's always very important that you do that. And instead of deleting the pictures with the trash can after you're all done, made sure they're backed up, I can't stress that enough, you always want to make sure that instead of using the trash can, you go into the little wrench here and you go to card setup and format your card. This is going to completely permanently erase all data from the card and allow you to reuse it as a brand new one. When you just use the trash can, it deletes the visible file of that card but keeps the data, which can actually cause issues down the line because it's essentially like, you know, putting your pictures into a recycling bin and that recycling bin getting full, and that can cause corruption, that can cause you know, you'd be locked out of your cards, which if that happens to you in the middle of a job or God forbid a wedding, you know, that's disastrous for you and your client. So it's really important that you know that every now and then, maybe not every time, but every now and then just be, you know, sure to go in to your menu and go to your card setup and format your card accordingly after you've backed up your pictures. We also have like your time settings, your language, checking your firmware, making sure it's up to date. And then of course, like I said, we have your My Menu, which is to your customization. And you would just add whatever you want to My Menu instead of having to dig through all of those options that we just went through. Other than that, do keep in mind that your shutter button pushed halfway down is going to be your universal escape button from any menu. This is going to be able to get you right back into your shooting mode if you do get a little lost here. But other than that, that pretty much sums up this camera. It's a pretty excellent camera, but again, it's going to be for a very specific type of shooter. Someone that's going to be doing more event stuff, someone that's going to be doing more portrait work, that wants that sharpness throughout the image, where you're getting a lot of the environment plus the portrait itself. This camera has definitely exceeded my expectations, especially when it comes to the speed. Is pretty amazing. If you have a camera store near you, I urge you to go and just hold one of these guys in your hands. They are pretty darn fantastic, and they feel kind of neat too. And like I said, the lightweightness of it in comparison to how it looks will blow you away in comparison to a full frame camera. So if you guys have any questions, just leave a comment below. If you'd like to see a specific camera walkthrough that I haven't done yet, also let me know. I'll be sure to add it to the list. And until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.